Thanks for tuning into our podcast. We love having you here, and it's our mission to bring you all the latest and greatest tips, skills, and know-how to make you the best that you can be. We know that you have it in you, and we're going to show you how. Now, let's get started.
Hello everyone, welcome to the Life of Great podcast show, and this is your host, Fulfillment Obi. I'm so excited to have you join me on my podcast today, and we'll continue from where we stopped last week, talking about the pain and pleasure paradox. Today we're talking about some things that will really shift your life to the next level as we're dealing with life upgrade. So we'll be looking at the following things in today's episode. Number 1, the pleasure motivation. Number 2, principle of pain. Number 3, triggers. Number 4, pain and pleasure emotional response. Number 5, how to deal with pain. And number 6, how to manage pleasure. You don't want to miss this one because it's going to be super awesome. Let's get into the episode.
Welcome. Time creates your life. You never know what happens tomorrow. But now, you in charge by time, space, and matter.
Alright, welcome back to the Life Upgrade, and this Fulfillment Obi here with you again. As I said earlier, we're talking about the pain and pleasure paradox. We've done a part 1 for this topic, and if you've not listened to it, I want to advise that you go back to listen to that episode because it will help you to really understand the things we're going to be talking about in today's episode. So if you've not listened to it, the link of the episode will be in the description of this episode so that you can go back, listen to it, and catch up with this episode. Alright, before we get started with this episode, I would love to do a quick recap so I can talk about some things I said in the last episode that will help us to build a foundation before we get into the things we're going to be talking about in this episode. I talk about how pain and pleasure coexist together and how one cannot do without the other, as this is the condition or the current state in our reality. We can't escape pain and pleasure. We have to deal with it as long as we continue to exist in this reality. So we're going to dive into the topic. We're going to talk about the pleasure motivation. Now, when we talk about the pleasure motivation, we're talking about those things that keep motivating us to chase after our dream, to do the things we need to do, even if they are difficult, so we can get to the places we want to get to. Now, we see people taking risks, we see people doing dangerous things, we see people doing things that could take away their life. Like, those things are very risky. They put themselves under pressure. They work 12 hours, 13 hours, 15 hours, 20 hours a day just because they want to gain success, which in turn will be very pleasurable for them at the end of the day. So they're trying to get comfort, so they put themselves under pressure. They have to endure a huge amount of pain just to get to where they want to get to. So this is what I call the pleasure motivation. And a lot of us, we are like this. We do a lot of things just because we are looking at the future. We're looking at the possible future where we'll begin to enjoy, where we'll have 6 figures in our account, where we'll get the cars, the houses, the shoes, the clothing, and we begin to trend online. We're popular, we're famous, we're traveling to country, we have a personal private jet. This is our imagination of what we want our future to be like. So we put ourselves under substantial pressure just to get to that level. So I call this the pleasure motivation. But more often than not, most people have come to realize that it doesn't always work like this. When we begin to envision a future where we are totally in control of our life, we have everything we need, we've attained success, and we have people to respect us, and everything is blissful, we put ourselves under some conditions that are not healthy for us. So we need to understand that the greater the vision, the greater what we're trying to chase after, the greater pain we have to endure. And some persons don't have the capacity to endure so much pain. So it leaves them frustrated, it leaves them confused, and it leaves them hopeless at the end of the day when they fail to realize those things they were chasing after from day one. So I want to put it this way: instead of working with pleasure motivation, I want us to redefine our goals and try to envision an end that is not essentially tied to pleasure. All right, instead of thinking about how you'll be so big in future and have all the cars, the houses, the luxurious watch and diamonds and be very popular and famous, why not look at it with a different light, from a different perspective? Why not envision your growth, how you're getting better every day, how you can do the things you could not do before, how you are able to impact the life of people, how you're able to contribute to society. This is more realistic and it will help you to better define your goals and know the limits you can endure, the limit of pain you can endure, so you don't put yourself under unnecessary pressure and on the end of the day you're not able to get anything off it. So this is a mistake a lot of us make. We try to build castle on the air, try to do things we are not yet capable of. So envision your growth, look at the things you're able to do that you could not do before, and try as much as possible to put it into perspective so you can measure the amount of pain you can currently handle or deal with. Alright, having established that fact and the foundation, the next thing I want to talk about is the principles of pain. Most of us, we don't understand pain, and a lot of people interpret it differently depending on the context in which they interpret the principles of pain from. So we're going to talk about how pain works in this reality. So we need to understand that pain and pleasure are just emotional response or response from the brain. Now, pain helps us to avoid harmful situations. According to evolutionists, they will argue that the reason why we feel pain is to help us to avoid situations that are dangerous and harmful so that we don't end up killing ourselves before time. And pleasure is just a reward for doing some certain things. So in the early stage when humanity were not yet civilized, you see, we were threatened by animals and dangerous beasts in the field, in the forest, as the case may be. And so pain helped people to understand dangerous situations and try to avoid them. But now in this present age, it is almost the same thing. Pain comes from different reasons for different sources. So the reason why you might be in pain or feel pain, it might be because of the previous decision you have made that had led to a very terrible end, and so now you have to deal with the consequences of your action. So when you look at how you felt then, you can now make better decisions so you can avoid pain. Now, anytime you feel pleasure, it's just a reward for doing something or for making a better choice in the past. For example, when a child puts his hand on the fire and he feels pain, next time when he sees fire, he tries to avoid it as much as he can because he knows that the end result is going to be painful. So when a child takes sweets or candy and they feel pleasure, it's very easy for them to try to repeat that action because it's pleasurable. So at the end of the day, this is our just emotional or psychological response to help us make better choices with our lives. Now, one of the contributing factors of this is what we call the dopamine effect. The dopamine is a special chemical in our brain that helps us to repeat pleasurable activity. So the reason why a lot of people are hooked to pleasurable activities or are addicted to some certain things that they should not be addicted to is because of the dopamine effect. And this experiment was carried out by scientists, and it was tested on mouse and rats. And at the end of the day, they found out that we tend to try to repeat pleasurable activities as much as we can just because of the dopamine effect. So this is just a quick overview of the principle of pain. So the reason we feel pain is to avoid terrible, harmful situations that might take our life. But in this modern era, it is somewhat different, as a lot of people are trying to redefine the concept of pain as it has to do with sociality and how we are able to connect with our environment or what we really want to get out of our life. So pain means different things for different people. As we keep going, we'll try as much as possible to give a perfect definition to help us understand the principles of pain. Now, the next thing I want to talk about is triggers, those things that activate pain and pleasure in our lives. And there are a couple of things I want to talk about here. First, I'll talk about consequences, reward, choices, patterns, and lifestyle. These are triggers. These are what triggers pain or pleasure response, emotional response, we have to do with psychology or human behavior. The first thing I want to talk about is consequences and reward. When you engage in an activity that is bad or harmful for you, the consequences you have to deal with is pain, so that you will learn not to repeat that activity next time or repeat it again. But in this modern era, we have tried as much as possible to stick to activities that are very pleasurable. And at the end of the day, because we over flooding our brain with the dopamine, it ends up becoming very addictive. For example, eating of sweets and sugar. There are people that are addicted to sugar. Sugar is one of the main properties that we need in our body to be able to function. Our body converts glucose to energy to help us to function. So because sugar is now everywhere, a lot of people fall into the trap or become addicted to sugar, and at the end of the day, it leads to obesity. So that choice again have led to a painful outcome, even if it was pleasurable why that activity was being done. So now it is very difficult to draw a sharp distinction between pain and pleasure. But if we put it into consequences and reward, it will help us to better understand how these things work in the real life. So let's take, for example, you know that this activity you're engaging in it's not going to lead to a good outcome. It's going to lead to a painful outcome. The best thing for you to do is to try as much as possible to avoid or limit that activity so that you don't have to deal with the consequences in the end of the day. So you have to try as much as possible to balance things up. So even if the activity is pleasurable, you have to try to define the limits to know where to stop or the limits of that particular activity. So when you draw this sharp distinction, it will help you to make better choices. It will help you to make better choices, and those choices will always lead to a good outcome, which I will call pleasurable outcome. The next thing I want to talk about is our lifestyle. The way we live our life determine if we are going to always deal with pleasure or with pain. The lifestyle a lot of people live, they live without taking into consideration what might become of the future. So they live their life anyhow. So I want you to take a deep introspection. What kind of lifestyle are you adopting? Are you living anyhow? Are you taking into consideration your body, your system, your work, your health, your mental state? Are you taking all these things into consideration? So you have to checkmate your lifestyle, and your lifestyle at the end of the day will tell us if you are going to be dealing with pain or with pleasure lifelong. So a lot of people have lived a kind of lifestyle that have kept them in the hospital for months or for years, or have disabled them for life. So check your lifestyle and want to live a life that will be impactful, a life that is healthy, a life that is good, a life that will draw you closer to your goal and upgraded life. Alright, right now let's talk about pain, pleasure, emotional response. For us to really understand, I will have to divide this into two categories: peak pleasure, peak pain. Peak pleasure, peak pain. Now, let's just take into consideration that there's a peak we can get to when it comes to pleasure, and there's a peak we can get to when it comes to pain. Now, when we get to that peak, we begin to see a reduction or a decline in either pain or pleasure, as the case may be. So let's take, for example, any pleasurable activity. For example, you were terribly hungry, and you walk into a restaurant and the aroma coming from the counter was so good, and you took an order. You ordered some food from, like, say, for example, you ordered fried chicken. At the beginning, when you start eating that food, it's so pleasurable, but after some time, when you are getting filled up and you're getting satisfied, the pleasure begins to reduce. So it is just like a curve that goes up and later come down. The same thing with pain, but when it comes to pain, it is quite different, because we all hate it and we don't want to experience it. So no matter how painful a situation or circumstance might be, it will always change and come down to become normal. So in the baseline, we have contentment, and that is what I want us to pride over. So we cannot always be in a constant state of pleasure or a constant state of pain. We need to try as much as possible to understand understand that we have peaks, and these peaks will help us to really define the limits. So when we look at those people who are super rich, who kind of think that, okay, these people are always experiencing the peak aspect of pleasure. Everything is great, everything is good, they don't need anything, they have all they need, they are comfortable 100%, they don't feel bad. And that's not always the case. There are rich people, super rich people, who have to still deal with pain. As we have established in the last episode, that money doesn't actually solve all your problems in life. You can have all the money in the world, and there are things you will not be able to solve, as that's just our reality. So you can't always experience peak pleasure or peak pain. It will always come down. So we have to learn to integrate contentment and gratitude into our life. You have to be contented with the place or the position you currently are in life. That will help you to make better, meaningful decisions and not put yourself under pressure that will lead to you breaking down in the future. You will not put yourself under unnecessary pressure that will be bad for your health. You will not put yourself in a state of constant chasing after shadows, things that will not become reality. So contentment is very important. I think I've done a podcast episode on that, talking about gratitude, how you can integrate contentment into your life and gratitude into your life to experience life in its fullest. You need to learn to be happy where you are while working towards your future. If you continually stay or dwell in a state of discontent, you will never be able to truly enjoy life. Now, I listened to one of Jay Shetty episode on his podcast when he was talking about being happy, how people keep postponing their state of being happy. I'll be happy when I have all the money in the world. I'll be happy if I'm able to graduate from college. I'll be happy when I finally get that house. It doesn't work that way. At the baseline, we need to understand that we'll have peak pain and peak pleasure, but at the baseline, we need to dwell on contentment. We need to integrate contentment and gratitude into our life. This will help us to experience life in its fullest. Now, if for any reason you're going through some situation and it's tending to peak pain, what you can do, I will discuss on the later aspect of this episode, as we're going to talk about how to handle pain and how to manage pleasure. So before we talk about how we can manage pleasure and deal with pain, I want to quickly drop this in between: the Legacy newsletter and the Living Flames of Fire newsletter and podcasts. Very, very important. If you're yet to be subscribed to these podcasts, then this is the perfect time to do that, because I know if you have been listening, you have actually or probably been learning a lot. So there are a lot of things I've been writing lately, and I feel those things will really impact your life. So please try to subscribe, and also subscribe to the Legacy newsletter, as I bring you powerful information that will truly, really change your life. If you're listening to this episode on Substack, it is very, 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 very easy for you to subscribe to the newsletter, as subscribing to the newsletter is automatically subscribing to this podcast. But if you're using other platforms like Spotify, Google Podcasts, or iTunes, then just check the link in the description of this podcast. It will lead you to the Legacy newsletter. That's fulfillment.substack.com. to lead you to the Legacy newsletter. You can subscribe and always get updates via email. We talk about things that can shape your life, how to make better decisions, and how you can do things that will really improve the state of your well-being. Also, we have a podcast that's dedicated to the things of spirituality and faith. To learn more about the Christian faith, I'll also drop the link in the description to this podcast, or you can search my name on any podcast platform. The Living Flames of Fire podcast will come up. Alright, right now let's start talking about how we can deal with pain and how we can manage pleasure. Now, there are different types of pain, and that will help us to understand how we can deal with that particular kind of pain. So I'm just going to list a few I have right here. What kind of pain? We have the pain of sacrifice, the pain of consequences, the pain of loss, pain of discouragement or disappointment, pain of health issue or sickness, emotional pain, as we have to do with heartbreak and abuse. Now, these categories of pain are different, and our response to it or how we can deal with it varies. We'll talk about the pain of sacrifice. That is putting yourself in a position, sacrificing a lot so that you can earn a better future. Now, the pain of sacrifice is one that is very difficult to manage or deal with, because by faith, you're working by faith, hoping that your sacrifices will yield a return in the future. And one of the ways you can deal with it is to be happy that you have the opportunity to sacrifice in the present. Now, a lot of people do not have the opportunity you have. A lot of people are striving to get to the position you're currently enjoying, or the place you are currently dominating. So if you understand this, then you'll be grateful for even having the opportunity to be able to sacrifice for a better future. So that is one of the ways you can deal with it. And if you want to make this work, you just need to keep envying those that are above you. And that's a terrible way to live. Number 2 is the pain of consequences. The pain of consequences is that kind of pain you feel when you're disappointed in yourself, or when you have made a bad choice or a bad decision in the past, and now you have to deal with the consequences. It's so painful as we tend to look at ourselves that, oh, I've messed up, it's so bad, I'm this, I'm that. It's easy to fall into the state of self-pity, and it's a very difficult thing to deal with. But one of the things we need to understand is that we cannot reverse past mistakes. We have to try as much as possible to deal with it, and the best way to deal with it is to consciously make better decisions that will help improve the state of your life. So let's say you made a decision and it was bad, or maybe you made a decision for a bad investment and you lose a lot of money. There's nothing you can do to go back to the past to change your decision. All you can do is to learn from it and start trying to make better decisions. Next is the pain of loss, and I'm going to talk about this from two perspectives. Now, from the perspective of being attached to something so much that when you lose it, it becomes very difficult for you to move forward. Have you ever loved something or someone so much that when you lose that person or lost that stuff, it's just kind of pulled you down for a very long time? You don't see the possible way you can move past that situation or past that loss. So one of the ways you can live your life to deal with this kind of pain is to try to detach yourself from your emotional state, or try as much as possible not to be too attached to something or to somebody, because people can disappoint you at any time, or you can lose that you wish you love so much at any time. The second aspect is when we lose a loved one, someone that was there to us, and maybe the person passed on and we don't know how to cope with the pain. You need the support of a family, a support group to help you deal with the loss or to help you deal with that pain. Or you can talk to God, you can connect with a community, with a family that will help you deal with that. So if you want to join a community, a Christian community online, I want to recommend the Living Flames of Fire Telegram group. That's a community that will help you deal with things like that. If you have any question, you can drop it there and you will find people that are ready to support you. I will drop the link in the description of this episode. The last kind of pain we'll talk about how we can deal with is the emotional pain of heartbreak, or when you're under constant abuse. Now, the pain of heartbreak is one that is so unique because a lot of people will deal with it as they progress in life, and this has to do with relationship, marriages, or union, business partnership. It's painful to lose those kind of relationship as time goes on, and when you have to deal with heartbreak, it is terrible, I must say. But there are a couple of things you can do to help you move past that point. And number one is to learn how to take care of yourself and your emotional, psychological, mental state. Understand that it's your responsibility to take care of yourself. It's not someone else's responsibility to do that. So by the time you come to terms with this, it will help you to learn to take care of yourself, and you can easily move on from that emotional pain. And if you're under constant abuse, or someone is abusing you or taking advantage of you, you can redefine the boundaries of that relationship. You can try, if it's within your power, you can report to the authorities. If it's not within your power, if it's within your power to report that scenario or that situation to the authorities, please do that. But if it's something you can walk away from, just try as much as possible to walk away from it so you don't end up harming your mental state. So before we close for today, before we get to the end, we just want to talk about how we can manage pleasures. I'm just going to briefly talk about some things we can do, which I've already talked about in this episode, but I'm just going to highlight them. First is knowing the limit. Understand the limit, know the limit you can take. Don't become addicted to pleasure. Number two, calculate the cost. Understanding the cost for what you have to pay will help you to really define the limit. Number three, understanding that pleasure is fleeting. We talk about peak pleasure and peak pain. You can always stay at the peak. As you engage in an activity and it's pleasurable, it will always go down. And lastly, detach from emotions so you don't become too attached to something and end up dealing with the pain of loss. So I want to hope that this episode have really been helpful to you, and you might have questions or things you really want to learn more about. So just send us a mail. The mail will be in the description of this podcast episode, or you just have something you would like to contribute, you can just join the newsletter. From there you'll see the comment section, or on Spotify, just leave your comment so that other people can also benefit from it. If you're kind enough to leave us a donation so we can keep improving this podcast, that will be very helpful. The link to the donation link will be valuable in the description of this podcast. And please, if you've really learned a lot, why not share the good news so that other people can also benefit from this episode. Thank you so much for joining us on this week of the Life Upgrade, and I want to pray that everything work out well for you according to God's glory. Before we go, we just take a scripture, Romans chapter 8 verse 28. All things work together for good to those that love God and are called according to his purpose. So I pray all things work out together for your good. Thank you so much. Until next week, stay blessed and stay empowered.
Join us again next time when we will be back with more tips, techniques, and cheats to achieve the rewards that you deserve. Thank you so much for your time today. And please set your podcatcher so that you never, ever miss us. Bye for now, and thanks so much for listening.